This video is sponsored by KiwiCo. How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to Boylai Hobby Time. Today I'm recreating an iconic Star Wars setting with a deep pit and no handrails, which could be any number of places in the Star Wars universe. But to be more specific, it's the reactor core complex room on Theed from the end of The Phantom Menace. The 3D file I used for this was made by Rebel Base Builds. It and many other cool 3D sculpts are available on his Patreon. You should definitely go check those out. I will put links to that below. Also, my friend Coach printed this bad boy for me, because I don't have a printer big enough. So big shout out to Coach. The Endless Pit in the movie is a little deeper than this thing obviously is, so in order to make it look deeper, I'm going to attempt to make it an infinity mirror. Along with the mirror, I'll have a red barrier at the back and some lights around the diorama and in the pit. And for the mirrors themselves, I decided to make them myself using some acrylic discs, but I forgot to check the thickness before I purchased them. I went ahead and got them set up as mirrors in case I could use them, but even at this point I highly doubted it. To set these discs up as mirrors, I bought some one-way mirror film, which allows light through one way, and the other side will look like a mirror. It's easily cut down to scale, and then you can just stick it together using a little bit of water. Once you squeeze all the water out, you should have full adhesion. Once the film was stuck to the acrylic, I flipped it over and I trimmed off the excess, and it actually worked pretty well. Unfortunately, they were just too thick. I foolishly thought I could cut the pit to accommodate the extra thickness of my incorrectly sized mirrors. I got actually partway into doing that before I finally stopped and said, nah, let's not do that. Instead, I cut a new disc out of some thinner acrylic, which fit into the hole, and then I used another glass mirror on the bottom. And as you can see here, this is how it's supposed to work. To really get a convincing look with this, you need a lot of light on the inside of the mirror setup and not much light without, which will come back to bite me later. But I started to put my LED noodles in place along with some diffusion film, and then I stopped because I realized I'd have to paint around all of that and it would be an absolute nightmare. So I took that outside and I gave it a coat of black, which will help stop any light leak. As good as the print was, there were some layer lines that needed to be dealt with, and the way I chose to do that was with some UV resin. I put it on all of the surfaces and I painted it around with a brush, and it is self-leveling, but it's even more self-leveling if you encourage it with some isopropyl alcohol. I cured and added a few thin layers, which I then finally sanded down and took the whole thing back outside to prime gray. So this idea of a Duel of the Fates infinity mirror actually came to me while I was putting together this project from KiwiCo last year. I told them about my idea and they wanted to make it happen. So they are the kind sponsor of today's video. KiwiCo creates toys and products that help stimulate hands-on learning and problem solving, following the principles of STEM. I'm all about that, and so is my son. I love the idea of hands-on learning and giving my son access to toys that don't simply entertain him, but also encourage him to ask questions and learn new skills. KiwiCo sent us this Play-Doh pasta roller, and we had fun figuring out how it worked together. My son loves helping us cook and clean, and he's constantly bringing us meals that he's prepared in his play kitchen. This is a great addition to that. He's also very excited that it came with a small pizza roller. Wow, that's awesome, bud. KiwiCo offers a subscription service with products for all ages, not just for little kids like my son. Take the inspiration for this video, for instance. Products like this infinity mirror can be found in one of their crate lines for older kids, or adults, or basically anyone who has a love of hands-on learning. And as was the case for me, hopefully putting together something like this will lead on to even more inspiration and creativity. Another thing my son loves is music, and that's something I really want to help him develop as he grows. Keys on this xylophone make it very easy to have a jam session straight out of the box. After showing him some of the basics, he jumped right on the melody, and I took the rhythm. If you're looking for gifts to encourage a child in your life, in cooking, music, art, or anything STEM related, I'd recommend KiwiCo. You can go to kiwico.com/boylai and use the code boylai at checkout for 50% off your first monthly crate. Link to that will be below. With the plastic able to block light and now fully primed gray, I was able to move on to the lighting details, starting with some diffusion film. This will help the lights not look like little concentrated light bulbs, but will spread out the light evenly across the whole gap. At least that's the hope. I put a strip of the film over each of the gaps around the shaft, as well as behind the triple light fixtures on either side of the hallway. And I guess I'm in the practice of buying thicker acrylic than I need. I didn't have any other red translucent material on hand, so this thick stuff is just what I had to go with. And I actually tried to cut off the hallway using a rotary tool, which didn't work. But I did slice it off camera on my bandsaw, and I cut out some notches so that I could add lights if I wanted to. But I put lights in there and it made almost no difference whatsoever, so I decided to just leave those off. James from Rebel Base Build actually sculpted some very nice details that were supposed to go in the empty slots you see here, and I was going to print those myself on my resin printer, but I punctured a hole in the bottom of the vat, which, needless to say, caused me some excitement. But I wasn't able to print those because I don't have a replacement for the film on the bottom of the vat, so I just had to make my own from styrene, which don't look as good as his. But if you do download this, it will come with all of the nice details that you don't see me using here. After applying that secondary darker coat of gray with a brush, I went back in with some black and the airbrush and darkened all of the corners a little bit further, and I'm really happy with how that looks. The interior of the diorama was looking pretty good, but now it was time to shift gears and go to the enclosure, which actually turned out to be a lot more difficult than I had anticipated. I used some foam to make the profile of the front of the diorama, which I attempted to clean up with a wooden veneer, and that didn't work in the slightest. And at this point I was getting kind of frustrated. It was late and I didn't have enough foam to do it the way I knew I needed to, so I decided to just take a little bit of a break, change pace, and work on the miniatures. That was a little bit of a mental refreshment. I glued the minis to some painting handles and then I primed them black using a black acrylic primer in the airbrush. I scoured the internet looking for these three characters in the correct poses from this moment of the Phantom Menace, and I couldn't find them anywhere. So I just had to use an online character creation platform and I got as close as possible. I am bummed though because I saw that a new Star Wars Shatterpoint expansion coming out will have Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan from the Phantom Menace, but that's being released later this year. It's also in a different size, so if I had waited to use the minis from that, I would have also had to reprint this thing at a larger scale, which it wouldn't have made sense. But it does bring up a interesting idea and a good use for this set. If you're into Star Wars Shatterpoint, you could print it a little larger, or if you're into Star Wars Legion, you can keep it the same size and use it yourself to make some really cool terrain. Honestly, making the other parts of the reactor room with those glowing pillars and the platforms would be a really cool terrain build. If any of you in the comments take on that project, please send me pictures. I'd like to see that. Or if somebody else has already done that, I'd also love to see that as well. The last mini to paint was Qui-Gon Jinn, who unfortunately got poked in the tummy before force healing was a thing. Or maybe it was already a thing, but Obi-Wan certainly didn't know how to do it. And after I was done painting him, I drilled a very shallow hole, which I painted black and dark red. With all three of the miniatures done, it was time to pack up my paints and go to bed. And the next day, I ran out to get more foam. I came back with a greater sense of excitement for finishing this diorama. And this is me figuring out how to do it. I decided to make a big, solid foam enclosure that the plastic interior could slide in and out of. I made that out of 2 thick blocks of foam with the appropriate shapes cut out. Kind of like I was making a box insert for shipping. The lower block got the circle cut out of it, as well as some little ears so that the shaft would sit flush, and then the top piece of foam got, well, whatever shape that is, cut out of it. Once the plastic interior was fully engulfed in foam, I traced out a spot that will become the opening on the front and the primary viewing angle. I got all my lines drawn accurately, but it still took some mental puzzle solving to carefully cut this without ruining it, because I foolishly only bought enough foam for one try. Thankfully, I got it mostly done correctly on that first try. There were only a few minor things that needed to be altered. Once those had been done, I glued all the foam together using some foam-safe superglue. I then removed the interior once again before doing some cleanup, starting with a light sanding of the imperfect surface, which of course I wore a respirator for, and the rest of the time I did have good airflow. The next step was to give the outside surface of the foam a protective shell that would provide a little more durability and also patch up some of the gaps that I had left. I mixed up some plaster, Mod Podge, and water to give it better adhesion, and also to be able to see where I was actually putting it, I added black paint. I brushed on 4 layers of that plaster mix, then I moved over to the lights while that was drying. These LED noodles are coated in silicone, which doesn't stick to anything, or nothing sticks to it, I should say. But a way to get around that, if you do want it to stick to things, is to wrap it in clear heat shrink. The heat shrink doesn't stick to the noodle, but it does shrink small enough that it has a nice firm grip. And then super glue sticks to the heat shrink, no problem. Once all the noodles were wrapped in silicone, I glued them in place where they needed to be. 6 of them around the gaps in the pit, and 6 more behind those light fixtures on the walls. While I was at it, I also positioned the minis and made some holes through the base where wires needed to run. After drilling those holes, or melting those holes, I should say, I ran some wires through, and then I flipped the whole thing back over again to work on the wiring. I made sure all of the filaments were oriented the same direction, which made it easier to wire them in parallel. That means that all of the positive leads are connected together, and all of the negative leads are connected together before going back to the negative and positive side of the power source. If you try to do it in series, which is negative to positive, and so on, you need extra voltage for each additional light. In this case, I would have needed 45 volts to run it, but in parallel, I just needed 3 volts. Next, I flipped the diorama back over and I glued the figures in place, including Qui-Gon Jinn, who did not get a lightsaber. Off camera, I sanded the dried plaster surface of the shell to get it just a touch smoother before painting the whole thing matte black. And the surface isn't perfect, but the black paint helps hide all the remaining imperfections. After that, the 2 pieces were ready to be joined together. I carefully ran the wires through the bottom where they eventually got connected to a battery housing and a switch. It was quite a snug fit, but I did eventually get it in there. Then I pushed the round mirror up until it was flush with the rim. Added the lower mirror, and finally, I wrapped up my wiring. As you'll see in just a moment, the infinity mirror thing didn't quite work as well as I had hoped it would. The bright lightsabers and other lights above the surface kind of destroy the illusion. From this angle, you can see the effect I was going for. Luckily for me, just one mirror at the bottom of the pit had a very similar effect from most viewing angles. So I decided to remove the mirror from the top, and I called it good. That is it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Huge shout out as always to my patrons. You guys are the best. And another thank you to KiwiCo for sponsoring today's video. Have an awesome week, everyone. I'll see you next time.